started.
Hello, this is Jeremy Kasner, 87566 on Yo-Yo Nation, or Jeremy K on Yo-Yo Expert. We're going to do a video about tops. There was a request made about doing some boomerangs with tops. I thought it was a good opportunity to show different tops, different styles. Also to show some tops that you can't get anymore, some that are difficult to find. There may be a lot of background noise. I got 4 kids, so that happens, plus my wife eating stuff, so it may be a bit noisy. But anyways, I was going to show you a couple of tops I have. Starting with my favorites, these are my main players. These are Yo-Yo Jams. There's 2 different styles that I have. They actually had 4 styles that I remember, if I remember correctly. They have one like this without the weight ring like this Gates has, and then they make one called a Chihuahua. And if you want to see what that looks like, it's really funny. It's narrow and dipped in. I don't have either one, unfortunately, but maybe one of these days I'll find one. These are my main players. This one's a Top Dog, bearing tipped. This one's a Gates, made for John Gates. He was the champion in 2000, world champion of top throwing. This one's fixed. If they ever start making tops again, they're going to make these ones. They're not going to make these. The biggest downfall about Yo-Yo Jams is their tips. They crack really easy. That's why most people just collect them and don't use them. They don't want issues with the tips breaking and not being able to replace them. I still play with mine, but I play over carpet when I use mine. Next up is Spintastics. This one's a Blizzard. It's a bearing-tipped yo-yo. It's got a great bearing in it. Spins a long time. You can still get these fairly easily. The Nation has them. Yo-Yo Guy has them. Spintastic site still has them. Next up is a Trompo Grande. This has got the cap off and got the weight ring out. I'm going to throw this to prove a point that you can throw just about anything that looks like a top, as long as it's got a tip on it in the right shape. This one's a bearing tip. They're really tough to throw, but they do work. Please excuse the distraction, my wife's making faces at me. So, anyways, next one's a Duncan. This is a ripcord. You can still get these in a number of places. This one's actually been modified to be a Bearing King. It has a bearing tip. You can get a ripcord and buy a Bearing King tip set. You pull your fixed tip out, throw the bearing tip in, and it'll spin really well. They're a great top. A lot of people still use these. Some people use Bearing Kings now, even though they quit making them, but the ripcords are very easily, you can get them very easily. This is a regular fixed tip. They make a couple different colors on those. This one is an old 60s twin spin Duncan. It's kind of a fun little top, really hard to get to spin upright, but this is an early 60s, just one of the ones I've collected. Next up is a Mizuno. It's a Delrin top. This is a plastic top. It's hollow. It's got bearings in it. It's got a stainless steel tip. A guy in Italy makes these. You have to get directly a hold of him to be able to get one. I don't know if he has any left. It's a great top, a lot of fun to play with. You can barely tell it's spinning when it does, because it's so smooth. Next is the Mexican ones. I've got a couple of these. My favorite's this one, called Diamante, or the Diamond. It's got plastic molded like facets inside of it. These are snap caps. This is a 2-tab. This is a 3-tab snap cap, like the Duncan Imperials. It's kind of tough to get out sometimes, but it comes apart like that. I modify mine with flowable silicone in the tip, so that gives it some weight in the tip. It gives it a longer spin, a little easier to handle, because these are a really light plastic top. Great for kids because they're so light and easy to use. Got another one right here. I have a wood Mexican top. This is kind of a souvenir style top. Most people buy these just for having. Not many people throw them. They're kind of tough to throw. They're really light. They have a rivet tip. Not like any of these other tops. This is just a basic rivet for metal. They drove it into the end of the top. It spins on it really well. It's hard to catch. Sometimes it bounces, but that one will be boomerang, so you can see how you throw it. Next up is Yo-Yo Factory. I have an Acrobat. There's 2 styles that they make. One's the throwback, one's the Acrobat. I didn't get a throwback because the Acrobat's supposed to be more stable. Eventually I'd like to get a throwback. This is an aluminum top. It's got a Delrin tip. It has 2D bearings stacked on top of each other in the tip itself to hold this in place. It spins really well. The only thing comparable to it is Yo-Yo Jam. These ones got great spin time just like these ones do. This one you actually have to use a special tool. It has a slider and also fun stuff to get the bearings out, put bearings in to replace tips. They got great tips. I've never replaced this one. This is the original tip I got with it. So that's a good top. Next up is my baby. This is a big one. This is a 5-inch Watts top. You can see right there. a good top. It's heavy. You got to be really careful when you throw it because things can happen. I had 2 casualties with this one. One was the wall and one was my son's foot. Didn't hurt his foot, but it could have. You got to be really careful when you throw these. You have to throw them a special way, so you can't just throw them like a regular top. I'll show you when it comes to boomeranging it. I have 2 others. They're novelties. This one, I've never been able to throw it. I got this at Nationals. It's kind of a fun-looking top. You hand that to someone and say, yeah, try throwing that. They look at you funny. I've never been able to do it. And plus, with the points the way they are, they're spiraled. That catches you, it's going to do some damage. And the other one is this little itty-bitty wood one. I got this when I got 2 of the yo-yo jams from a friend that he threw this in there with it. I've never been able to boomerang it. It's so light and such a short string, it's really tough to throw. But that's it for basics. That's pretty much all the tops I have, too, for now. So we'll go on to throwing next. Next up's the Mexican with the rivet tip, the really light wood one that I have. It vibrates like crazy, but it spins alright. Next up's the other Mexican one I have. This is the one I modified with the flowable silicone in the tip. This one uses the Imperial ring, like the old Duncan Imperials have. Goes on the top button at the top. You wind it just like a normal top. I find that most of the Mexican plastic ones come with those rings. They like those down there. A lot of the throwers that get our American style tops or tops from other places will use these anyways. They just like the way they work. Spins nice and smooth, works good. Next up is the gates with a fixed tip. Very smooth top. You really can't tell it's spinning. Doesn't have barely any vibe in it whatsoever. It's a really great top to play around with. Next up is the Trompo Grande without the cap or the ring. To wind this one, take your knot, start on the one side, go across to the other, wrap around your tip once, and you have to take the string and actually catch your knot and bind it down. Oops. It's kind of tough to do sometimes. Wind it up. Hopefully I can throw this right the first time. Sometimes I mess it up. But when you get it done winding, you just make sure that string's going across the center of it. You have to be not bound. It's a loud top because the cap's off. Also the tip's actually bent in this one, so it vibrates a bit too, but it's kind of a fun one to play with. Next up is the Watts top, my baby. You wind this just like a regular top, but the way you throw it's different. So we'll wind it up first. I use a 3/8 rope. This is what comes with this top. I use a bind ring on my finger like a normal yo-yo because I tend to slip with the buttons and I don't want my top going across the room. When you wind these, you want your first 2 wraps to be nice and tight, and the rest of them, you know, tight of course, but if you don't have your first 2 tight, you'll have a bad throw. It'll vibrate really bad. When you throw this one, you throw it with the tip out flat and underhand like a bowling ball. Not the best throw. It's got some considerable vibe. You can see you actually take and put nails in this in the sides where they're heavier to balance it out. I haven't gone through and done that yet. That takes quite a bit of work, but that's it for boomerangs. That's just the basic ones I have. I have a ton more tops, but I'd rather just give you some simple ones.